My name is Glen Mackay, and I'm 57 years old. 3 days after I wired $38,500 into my daughter's wedding account, I got a message from my future son-in-law's mother, saying the guest list was being kept intimate, just the families who had truly been part of making it all happen. I read it standing in the driveway of a job site in Barrie with a flashlight in my hand. The words didn't move. I read them again anyway. My mother is 77. She lives alone in Collingwood, and she had already bought a dress. My sister and her husband were expecting an invitation. So were the 2 apprentices who'd worked in my shop for a combined 19 years, and the neighbors from Cedar Street, who'd looked after my daughter after school for 2 years so I could make the evening calls. 11 people I counted. Not one of them on the seating chart Roberta had attached to that message. I did not reply. I looked at the clock on my phone. RBC opened in 10 hours, and there was something about the Friday afternoon transfer that no one in my family knew yet. Let me take you back to that Thursday in October, 2 days before the message came. I walked into the branch on Dunlop Street at 3:20, with pipe dope on my cuffs. I'd been under a crawl space since 7:30 that morning, fixing a burst supply line, and I didn't go home to change. It didn't feel like the kind of thing you dressed up for. Meredith has worked that branch for 14 years. She knows my account the way I know a P-trap. She didn't blink at the cuffs. Afternoon, Glenn. What can I do for you? I need to send a wire. She pulled up the form on her screen. I wrote the number in the box. $38,500. 18 of it came from selling the ice hut. I'd had it on Lake Simcoe for 17 years. 12 by 10, propane heat, 2 tip-up holes, a bench that Maureen and I shared under a Hudson's Bay blanket every January for as long as I could remember. I sold it to a man from Midland for $14,000 cash. He came with a pickup and a trailer, and I watched him drive it down the road, and I went back inside and made tea I didn't drink. The other 20.5 came out of my RRSP. Early withdrawal, 30% withheld at source. I did the math on a piece of graph paper at my kitchen table, the kind I use for rough drawings on jobs, and then I folded it up and put it in the recycling because the math didn't change anything. Meredith turned the screen toward me to confirm the memo line. I typed 4 words, for Amber, always, Dad. You want the confirmation sent to your email? No need. She hit submit. The printer behind her started up. Then she said something I absorbed the way you absorb a weather warning for a region you're not driving through. Going in after 3 on a Friday, Glenn. If the receiving bank takes the long weekend, it might not settle till Tuesday. I nodded. I took the receipt. I folded it into my jacket pocket next to a stub pencil, and I drove my van back to Barrie to finish snaking a floor drain for a woman whose bathroom had been backing up since August. I didn't call my daughter. I figured the money would say what it needed to when it arrived. There was a group chat. It was called The Big Day, and it had 31 people in it. I don't know when I was added. Hayden's mother, Roberta, sent somewhere between 20 and 40 messages a day, venue updates, color swatches, something she called an aesthetic mood board that as far as I could tell was a photograph of other photographs. In 4 months I sent 2 messages. The first was a thumbs up. The second was a question about parking for my van that nobody answered. I want to be fair. I wasn't sitting in a corner feeling wounded about mood boards. I was working 10-hour days. I read that chat the way I read the traffic report on a highway I'm not on. But in September, Roberta posted a photograph. It was a wooden board, maybe 4 feet tall, the kind you prop on an easel at a venue entrance. Someone had lettered a word across the top in white chalk in a pretty looping hand. Contributors. The caption said, they wanted everyone to feel appreciated for what they'd given to the day. I looked at it for maybe 5 seconds. I thought it was a decoration. I thought it was one of those things people do now, like an unplugged ceremony or a signature cocktail named after the couple's dog. Roberta wrote underneath, everyone who's poured into this deserves to be seen. 14 hearts. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat and went back inside to finish a pressure test. That was a month before the message came. The Saturday it came, I was at my mother's house in Collingwood replacing a bathroom exhaust fan that had been humming wrong since spring. She won't call anyone but me. I had my head in the ceiling cavity and my phone buzzed against my chest. I finished securing the housing first, then I climbed down and looked. It was a direct message from Roberta Finch, not the group chat. Hi Glenn, we've decided to keep things intimate. Just the families who've truly been part of making this happen. I know you'll understand. Exciting times. Attached was a screenshot, seating chart, round tables 1 through 18, names in small gray type. I zoomed in the way Amber had showed me, 2 fingers on the glass and went table by table. 160 names. Not one Mackay, not my mother, who has known my daughter since the first hour of her life, not my sister or her husband, not Pete Doucet, who drove Maureen to her chemotherapy appointments in Barrie 11 times when I couldn't leave a job site. Not my 2 apprentices who let a teenage Amber ride along in the service van after school and paid her in Tim cards on Fridays. Not the couple on Cedar Street who had a key to my house for 6 years. I read it twice. I want to tell you my hands shook. They didn't. Something went quiet in a way I recognize, the way a house goes quiet when the furnace shuts off, and you realize you'd been hearing it run all along. You almost done in there, hon? My mother was in the hallway with a dish towel. Done, Mum. I finished the fan, I tested it, I screwed the cover back on, and I checked the switch, which came up fine, and then I sat in my van in her driveway and opened my banking app. I was not going to reply to Roberta, not that night, not ever. And on the screen there was a word I hadn't expected to see. Pending. The wire hadn't settled. Before I tell you what I did with that, I owe you an honest answer to a question you're already forming. Why hadn't I said anything? Why hadn't I told anyone what I was putting in? Maureen used to do that for me. She'd be at a family dinner and she'd say, "Tell them about the Henderson job, Glenn." Some story about a flooded basement I'd fixed at cost because the family couldn't cover the bill, and I'd wave her off and she'd tell it anyway. She was the one who kept the record. I was the one who kept the pipe wrench. She died 5 years ago. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis. After the funeral, I discovered something nobody warns you about. When the person who narrates your life is gone, the story stops. No one picks up the pen. There's no moment where they hand it to somebody else. There were $68,000 in medical bills. I paid them over 4 years. Never missed a mortgage payment. Never asked my family for a dime. To this day, I don't believe more than one person in my family knows that number. I never said it. Why would I? You don't announce that you paid your wife's bills. You just pay them. And that's the trade I never noticed making. My whole working life is invisible on purpose. If I do it right, the water runs clean, and nobody thinks about the man in the crawl space. That's the standard. Good work disappears. That's how you know it's good. I forgot that people aren't plumbing. At 10:15 that night, Amber called. I let it ring once, then I answered. Dad. She sounded the way people sound when they've been rehearsing in a parked car. Amber. Did you get Roberta's message? I did. A pause. Hayden's television in the background. Did you know? I asked. Too long before the answer. I knew it was coming. Roberta controls the deposit on the venue, and she's been handling all the numbers. And if I fight her on every single thing, we don't get to the actual wedding. I have to pick which hills. This wasn't a hill. It's a text and a seating chart. It's 11 people. Dad, I know. Your grandmother bought a dress. She went quiet then, not the rehearsed kind. I had one question that had been sitting in my chest since the driveway. I asked it. Amber, do you think I haven't contributed? 4 seconds. I counted them. I didn't know what you'd put in, Dad. You never said. I sat with that. Because she wasn't being cruel, she was being accurate. She didn't know because I hadn't told her. That was the situation I had built, one silent transaction at a time, over 28 years. That's fair, I said. I'll fix that part. Dad. Get some sleep. I hung up and sat in my van in my own driveway until well past midnight, because the house was where the decision was and I wasn't ready to make it inside. Monday morning at 8:45, I was standing outside the RBC on Dunlop Street before Meredith unlocked the door. She saw me through the glass. Her expression shifted the way expressions do when a routine morning turns into something else. She let me in without comment. Friday's wire, I said. Has it settled? She sat down, she typed. Still pending on our end. The receiving institution flagged the long weekend. The beneficiary account hasn't accepted it yet. Can it be stopped? She went and got Stan. Stan manages that branch, mid-50s, cardigan, the kind of man who has said no to a lot of people very politely over a long career. He read the screen over Meredith's shoulder for a full minute before he turned around. We can submit a recall request. Under the payment rules, we can recall a transfer before final settlement, and we haven't transmitted final settlement yet. There's a window. He paused. Two things, Glenn. There's a $35 fee. That's not the concern. He set a single page on the counter. If the receiving bank has already acted on the funds, or the other party can show they relied on them, any exposure is yours, not the bank's. Understood. I'm not finished. He looked at me steadily. This isn't a guarantee. We submit the recall. The receiving bank has to honor it before they credit the account. Most of the time they do. What's most of the time? He lifted one shoulder. 8 or 9 out of 10. You won't know until this afternoon. Meredith was watching me the way she had for 14 years. Watching a man in a dirty jacket make a decision. You sure, Glenn? I thought about a dress on a padded hanger in a closet in Collingwood. I'd like it recalled, I said, and I'd like that in writing. I signed. Stan witnessed it. Then I had 6 hours to get through, and there was only one way to get through 6 hours like that. I went to work. Pete Doucet showed up at the job site in Innisfil at 11 with 2 large double doubles. He'd heard from Amber's neighbor, who'd heard from my sister, which is how information moves in a town this size. Nobody asks first, they just appear. He set one coffee on the stack of PVC I was pulling from and started cutting pipe without being asked. We worked half an hour without talking. Then I told him everything. The ice hut, the RRSP and the withholding, the message. The seating chart, his own name removed from a table he'd never been assigned to. The bank that morning. The 8 or 9 out of 10. I've known Pete since 1994. He didn't say, "Oh, Glenn." He didn't say, "That's terrible." He kept cutting pipe. When I finished, he set his cutter down and stared at the fittings for a moment instead of at me, which I appreciated. They crossed off your mum. They did. Huh. Another stretch of quiet. Then he asked me the only question that whole month that I couldn't answer. What are you going to do with it when you get it back? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I had spent 11 straight hours thinking about recalling the wire. I had not spent 1 second thinking about the money itself. What it was for now. What a man does with $38,500 he pulls back out of his daughter's wedding. I don't know, I said. Pete nodded like that was the right answer. Recalling it is the easy part, he said. Figuring out what it means now. That's the actual work. He picked up his cutter and went back to the pipe. At 22 minutes past 3, my phone buzzed on the stack of PVC, an email notification, not a text. I knew from the subject line. Wire recall confirmed. Funds returned to originating account. Reference 4491. 38,500 minus 35 processing fee. I climbed off my knees, walked out to the van, sat. I want to tell you it felt good. It didn't. It felt like carrying a sofa back up a flight of stairs and setting it back where it started. The money was mine again. It had never been about the money. I sat in the van maybe 10 minutes. Then I got my phone and typed an email to the venue coordinator. Lorena Stubbs, Thornfield Heritage Barn, outside Barrie. I'd had her card in my jacket pocket for 39 days, tucked behind my insurance slip. 4 sentences. I rewrote them 7 times. Miss Stubbs, I'm writing to withdraw as financial guarantor on the Glen Mackay booking for May 17th, effective today. Please advise the planning contact to designate a replacement and provide documentation of financial capacity as required by Section 7. I'm available by phone if you need anything from me to process this. I've copied Amber Mackay on this message. I did not copy Roberta Finch, not to be clever about it. Roberta wasn't the guarantor. She was listed as planning contact. The contract was with the venue, and the correct address for that sentence was the desk of the woman who held the binder. I hit send from the parking lot of a supply house in Barrie, with pipe dope still on my cuffs. Then I went back inside and finished the job. For 4 days, absolutely nothing happened. The group chat argued about table centerpieces. Someone posted a countdown, 61 days. Nobody called me. Amber sent one text on Tuesday evening. Dad, are you okay? And I wrote back, working, I'm fine. My mother called Wednesday afternoon the way she calls when there's nothing to call about. Which is how I know something is wrong. I told her I was busy and I'd come by the weekend. I went to work. I ate standing at the kitchen counter. I watched the hockey game with the sound turned low. And on Wednesday night I did something I'd have been embarrassed for anyone to see. I got out a yellow legal pad. the kind I use for job estimates, and I started writing down everything I'd ever done for my daughter. Not to send it anywhere. There was no one to send it to. I wrote that I was at the hospital 30 minutes after Maureen's water broke, because I'd been finishing an emergency call in Innisfil. I wrote 8 years of dark morning drives to Ringget. I wrote the $1,700 for her first car's transmission in 2019. The damage deposit on her first apartment in Guelph, the year she was 22 and came home between jobs and sat at my kitchen table for 4 months figuring herself out. And I said nothing and let her, and I put food in front of her on Sundays and otherwise left her alone. 3 pages on a legal pad, front sides only. Somewhere near the bottom of the 3rd page I wrote a line. Looked at it for a while. Then I crossed it out with 2 clean strokes and wrote something else underneath in the same pen. I'll come back to that line. Friday morning, Lorena Stubbs sent an email to every party on the venue file. I got a copy, so did Roberta, Hayden, Amber, and a Finch cousin listed as day of contact. 5 lines, no adjectives. The financial guarantor of record has withdrawn as of October 27th. Per Section 7 of the signed agreement, a replacement guarantor must be designated within 10 business days with supporting documentation. If no designation is received by November 10th, the booking will be placed on hold and the date may be released. Please advise, L. Stubbs, Thornfield Heritage Barn. I read it 40 times in the days that followed. Still not one adjective in the whole thing. Hayden told me later how it landed on their end, and I've pieced together the rest from 4 different people since. Roberta read it at 7 minutes past 8 with her morning coffee and did not understand it. Not because she's careless, because she'd never known the role existed. She believed she was the responsible party on that contract. She'd walked into every venue meeting like she owned the room. It had not occurred to her that someone else's name was on a different line of the signature page. She called Hayden. Hayden was on a rooftop in Barrie and let it ring. She called the venue. Lorena wasn't in until 10. So at 9:05, my phone lit up on the dash of my van with a name that had never appeared there before. Roberta Finch. In 3 years, that woman had never called me directly. Not when Hayden proposed. Not at the engagement dinner. Not when they booked the venue. I let it go to voicemail. I listened in the Home Depot parking lot, twice. Glenn Hahn, it's Roberta. I think there's been some sort of mix-up with the venue's system. Their file seems confused about something to do with a guarantor. I'm sure it's just an admin glitch on their end. Could you give me a quick call back? Thank you so much. I called her at 10:20. She picked up before the second ring. Warm voice, bright. The one you use at an open house when someone walks through the door. I'd heard it once at her office. Glenn, thank you so much for calling back. I got the strangest email this morning from the barn. It isn't a glitch. I withdrew Monday afternoon in writing. The warmth went out of her voice the way daylight goes out in November. Fast and complete. Why on earth would you do that? Because your message last Saturday said I hadn't contributed. Glenn, that is not what that meant. It's what you wrote. I signed a roll and I unsigned it. That's the whole event. You are blowing up your daughter's wedding over a text message. I looked out the windshield at a man loading drywall onto a flatbed. I'm withdrawing from a role that doesn't count as contribution, I said. I'd think you'd be relieved. It's one less name on your list. This is incredibly petty. Roberta, one thing before you hang up. What? You've been telling people the barn caps at 160. Silence. It holds 210. I have a copy of the contract. I signed the page that says so. The silence ran long enough that I checked the screen to make sure the call was still connected. Then she said, very evenly, I'll have Hayden call you. And she hung up. She still thought all I had ever done was sign my name on a piece of paper. Hayden didn't call, but that Saturday morning Roberta posted a photograph on her social media page. Natural light, tasteful, the kind of image she'd use for a listing. The caption ran 4 paragraphs. I'll only give you the shape of it. She wrote about how painful it is when family chooses conflict over celebration. She wrote about praying for peace. She thanked everyone for the love and support. She never used my name. She didn't need to. In a town of 12,000 people, 90% of them knew whose daughter was getting married in May. By noon, my phone had done things it had never done before. A cousin I hadn't spoken to in 4 years sent me a paragraph about what family means. A woman from Roberta's office I'd met exactly once sent me a Bible verse about peacemakers. Pete forwarded me a screenshot to make sure I'd seen it, because Pete knows me. 43 voicemails by Sunday night. I counted them because I couldn't sleep. Then at 4:30 Sunday afternoon, a direct message from Roberta. I never said you didn't matter. You're twisting this to make yourself the victim when it's supposed to be about them. I sat with that for about an hour. Then I did the only thing that whole month I'd call shrewd, and I'm not proud of how deliberate it was, but I'd do it again. I scrolled up in that same message thread to her original text from the week before. Still there, she'd never deleted it. Her words, her name, the timestamp. I screenshotted it and sent it back into the same conversation. No caption, not one letter of commentary. The typing dots came up, ran and stopped, started again, stopped a third time, then disappeared. She never answered that message, not once, not ever. I'm going to stop here for a moment because this is the part where I almost let go. 43 voicemails. A cousin I'd known since she was 3 years old telling me I was destroying the family. My thumb over the screen at midnight, ready to type, I'm sorry, I'll put the money back, let's just fix this. If you've ever been the one person holding a line while everyone around you calls you the problem, type a 1 in the comments. I'd like to know this room isn't empty. Alright, 11 days after that Sunday, it was Amber who found it. She was going through the joint account she and Hayden had opened for wedding expenses, trying to figure out what was committed and what could still be redirected. She scrolled past a line, stopped, scrolled back up. Wire received, 38,504th, wire recalled, October 27th, Memo, for Amber, always, Dad. She called me. I was asleep at 10:15 like a man who gets up at 5, didn't pick up. At 11:40, headlights crossed my bedroom ceiling. She'd driven 40 minutes from Barrie. I opened the door in my work socks. She was standing on the step with her phone in her hand, and she couldn't get the first sentence out. She tried twice. What she finally landed on was, "You sold the ice hut." "It was my hut," I said. "Your mom and I just used it." And my daughter, who is 28 years old and the most composed person I know, put her hand flat against the doorframe and fell completely apart. I let her. I put my arm around her shoulders the way you do, even when they're not a kid anymore. Even when they're taller than you expected them to get. When she could talk, she said, "I have to tell Hayden. I have to tell all of them tonight." "Don't." She pulled back and looked at me. "Dad, they think you just." "I know what they think. Let it sit." "Why?" "Some things land different," I said. "When they don't come from the man they'd benefit." She didn't understand. I could see it on her face. She would in 8 days. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday. $12 to make a point. It was from a lawyer whose name I recognized from the sign outside Roberta's office. A man who handles real estate closings and is not by any measure a litigator. One page, designed to look like the first step before a lawsuit. Their client had relied on my commitment. They requested I restore my obligations within 7 days to avoid further action. I read it at the kitchen table, and I want to tell you exactly what I felt, because it surprised me. Relief. Because a letter like that is the move of someone who has run out of the thing she's actually best at, which is getting other people to carry her decisions for her. When that stops working, you send a letter from a man who reviews deeds. I didn't call a lawyer. I didn't need one. I forwarded Lorena Stubbs a copy of my withdrawal email with the original timestamp and added 2 sentences. "Ms. Stubbs, for your file, I made no written financial commitment to this event, and no such document exists. I signed a guarantor role and withdrew from it through your stated process." 12 minutes later, from a woman who had been handling weeping families for 19 years, received and noted, L. Stubbs. 2 words, 19 years of experience in those 2 words. The lawyer never sent a second letter. The dinner happened 9 days before Lorena's deadline. Roberta had organized what she called a gratitude evening in the loft above the barn at Thornfield. Pine ceiling, string lights, tall windows looking down over the ceremony lawn. 38 guests, printed menus, and at the top of the stairs on an easel, the chalkboard from the group chat photo. Contributors, 19 names in white chalk. I wasn't invited. I found out because Pete called me Thursday, careful as a man stepping onto uncertain ice. "There's a thing Saturday, Glenn." I know. Saturday evening I was home, 7:45, I was in the basement fixing a slow drain in the laundry sink I'd been meaning to get to since July. An hour of work. The drain had been backing up for 4 months in a plumber's own house, because I never get around to my own. I snaked it, ran the hot water, it cleared. I was rinsing my hands when my phone rang on the workbench. It was Amber, road noise. Her voice was the voice of a person describing an accident. "Dad, are you somewhere you can sit down?" I sat on the basement stairs. Here is what happened, as she told me that night, and as I've since confirmed from 4 other people who were in that room. At 10 to 8, Lorena Stubbs came up the stairs with her binder under her arm. She was not there for dinner. The 10 business days had expired at 5 that afternoon. She waited near the staircase for a break in the room. When none came, she took one herself. "I'm sorry to interrupt. I need a guarantor designation before Monday morning, or I'll need to release your date." The window closed at 5 o'clock. Roberta set her wine glass down and smiled at Lorena the way you smile at a contractor who's arrived at an inconvenient moment. "Lorena, we can absolutely handle that Monday morning. No problem at all. I need a name and proof of financial capacity, tonight." A man near the back, Hayden's uncle, apparently said, "Designation for what?" "The financial guarantor on the venue contract." A woman by the window, "Who's on it currently?" Lorena set her binder on the corner of the nearest table. She opened it to the signature page, put on her reading glasses. Read the line aloud the way she would read any line from any document in 19 years of doing this work. "Financial guarantor, Glen Mackay." Amber told me the playlist kept going for 5 full seconds. Nobody thought to turn it off. 38 people sat there with my name in the air. Directly behind Lorena's left shoulder, 4 feet tall on an easel, was a board with 19 names in white chalk. Mine was not one of them. Roberta recovered quickly. She's good at that. I've never once said otherwise. "Glenn signed as a courtesy," she said to the room. "A formality for the paperwork. He hasn't put in $1 toward this wedding." And Hayden stood up. Hayden doesn't raise his voice. 3 years I've known him. I have never once heard him raise his voice. He reached into his jacket pocket and took out his phone and set it face up in the middle of the table and slid it toward the candle at the center. "That's the bank record," he said. $38,500, October 24th. The memo says for Amber. Always, Dad. Amber told me a woman leaned in first, then the man beside her. "He sold the ice hut," Hayden said. He looked at the chalkboard instead of at his mother when he said the last part. 3 days later, you messaged him that only the families who'd truly been involved were on the guest list. He wasn't on your wall, he was on your contract. He picked up his phone and put it back in his jacket. Amber said the sound she remembers is a fork going down on a plate, not voices, just a fork. Then a woman near the far table, one of Roberta's real estate colleagues, someone who'd been in the industry in this region for 30 years, looked at the seating chart on the easel beside the chalkboard. "The way you look at something when you don't want to look at the people," she said mildly, "the way you'd ask about the evening's menu. Roberta, this guest list, is this primarily your book?" Nobody had to explain what she meant. Every person in that room who sold or bought property in this county understood it immediately. And every one of them had just done the count. Roberta said, "That's an unkind thing to say." The woman said, "I count 9 people from my brokerage at my table alone." That question did more damage than anything I could have said in a year of trying to say things. Then someone near the window, Hayden's aunt, said quietly, "Wait, why isn't Iris Mackay here? She's known Amber since she was born." And that was the sentence that emptied the room. Because half the people at those tables had sat in my mother's Sunday school class at Barrie Road United Church. She'd been teaching there for 26 years. A 77-year-old woman had been moved off the list to make room for a mortgage broker. 3 people got their coats. Not dramatically. Amber said that was what struck her most. They stood up the way you leave something that has quietly gone wrong, reaching for a purse. No scene made. Roberta kept talking about the ceremony timeline, the shuttle from the hotel downtown, the florist setup window, and not one person in that room was listening to her anymore. Meanwhile, I was in the basement of my own house with a hand auger, completely alone. My phone rang at 8:12. I had grime on my hands. I answered on speaker and set it on the step. Road noise, Hayden's voice. "Glenn, are you all right?" "I'm all right." He told me everything in under 2 minutes, fast, out of order, doubling back. Lorena on the stairs, his mother's hand on the wine glass, his own voice sounding unfamiliar when he stood up. I didn't say a word while he talked. I sat on the stairs with the auger in my lap and let him finish. When he got to the end, he said it twice. She read your name off the contract, Glenn. In front of everybody, off the binder. All right. Nobody in that room knew, not one of them. All right, son. Then the part I have left out every time I've told this story. I put the phone face down on the step, and I sat there for a while, and I cried. Not about the money, not about being right. It was 5 years of nobody holding the pen, and a woman with a binder held it for 12 seconds by accident. Hayden was quiet on the line and let me have it, and I will be grateful to him for that as long as I live. When I could talk, I asked him one question, not the one he expected. Your mom, did anyone in that room say her name? He paused. Glenn, 3 people left their seats when someone brought up that she wasn't there. I put my hand over my eyes and held it there. Then I asked the second one, and the wedding? He exhaled slowly. There isn't one, not in May. Lorena released the date Monday morning at 9. A couple from Aurelia had been on the wait list and took the slot by Wednesday. The deposit was $9,000, and Section 11 of that contract is very clear about what happens to a deposit inside 90 days. It doesn't come back. The invitations had already gone out, 150 of them, letterpress, from a print shop in Toronto. $640. Amber sent a cancellation through the wedding website, and about 30 people RSVP'd anyway over the following 6 weeks because they hadn't seen the notice. 2 agents pulled their listings from Roberta's office the following month. I heard the commission on those 2 transactions was somewhere north of $22,000. I want to be careful here because this is the part where a man in my position is supposed to feel something like satisfaction. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post anything. I have never said one word about Roberta Finch to a single client, contractor, or colleague, and I have had 50 chances in a town this size. Every dollar of that came from choices she made in rooms I wasn't in. Amber and Hayden separated for 3 weeks. It was the worst 3 weeks of my daughter's adult life, and I won't tell you, I feel nothing about my part in that. I wrote it on the legal pad. I still have the page. Didn't cross anything out on that one. I needed to read it more than I needed to write it. 6 weeks after the dinner, Hayden showed up at my door on a Sunday evening, sat at my kitchen table. He told me Amber didn't know he was there. I need to ask you something directly, he said. Go ahead. Do you want this to work out, honestly? I looked at him. He's 29, works HVAC, has never asked me for anything he didn't intend to give something back for. I want my daughter to be with someone who stands up in a room when it costs him something, I said. You did that, so yes, I want it to work out. He nodded. He stayed for dinner. We didn't discuss it again. They married the following October in Pete Ducey's backyard in Innisfil. 29 people, folding chairs borrowed from the church hall, a rented tent that Pete and I put up in 3 hours the morning of, and took down in 2 the day after. Total cost, Amber showed me the sheet without my asking, $4,200. No chalkboard. Nobody wrote down who gave what. I don't believe the thought crossed a single mind. Roberta came. I want to say that part plainly. She was invited by Hayden, and she came and she sat in the 3rd row in a gray wool coat, and she did not say one inappropriate word the entire afternoon. She was quiet, and it wasn't repentance. I've never once believed it was repentance. There was simply nothing to work with. 29 people in a plumber's backyard, none of whom were ever going to list a property with anyone, and no room to stand and no room to perform. A woman who had spent 22 years managing every room she walked into sat in a folding chair with her hands in her lap. That was enough, and it was permanent, and I've made my peace with it being both. My mother came in her dress. She'd returned it when the original date was canceled, and in September she'd gone back to the boutique and bought it again, full price. She wore the low heels. Smart call on a lawn in October. Pete's backyard held 29 people with room left over for the kids to run. Thornfield would have held 210. The numbers don't mean what Roberta thought they meant. Amber asked me to say a few words at dinner. She surprised me with it on purpose. I stood up with a paper cup of ginger ale, and 29 people looked at me, and I understood in about 2 seconds why Maureen always did this part. I said 4 things. I said, Hayden, you stood up in a room where it cost you something. Maureen would have loved you for it. I said, Pete, thank you for the yard. And for 1997, which you know about. I said, Mum, you look beautiful, you always did. And then I stopped. Something turned over in my chest, and I did the one thing I have not done in 57 years of living. I looked at my daughter. Your mum used to tell people what I'd done because I never would. She's been gone 5 years, and I've let all of it just sit in the dark. I raised the cup. I built this kid's life with my hands, and I'm proud of her. That's all. My mother put her flat hand on the table. Pete looked at the grass. In the third row, Roberta Finch cried. Her daughter didn't go to her. Hayden didn't go to her. Nobody in that yard moved toward her. I noticed. I didn't move either. That was the last consequence, and I have decided it was a fair one. I got home a little after 11, came in through the side door, put my jacket on the hook, dropped my keys in the dish on the counter. Then I did one thing before I went to bed. I found the legal pad on the kitchen table and opened it to the third page, to the line I had crossed out with 2 clean strokes and rewritten underneath in the same pen. The first version said, paid for her mother's medical bills. The second version, the one I wrote after I crossed it out, said, held her hand at the hospital. Because the first one is a receipt, and the second one is what actually happened between us in that room. I closed the pad. I turned off the kitchen light. The house was quiet. The drain in the basement was clear. I went to bed. Here's where I've landed, and then I'll let you go. I still do the work. That hasn't changed, and it isn't going to. Somebody's pipe burst on Christmas morning. Somebody's sump pump goes at 2 a.m. in March. That's what I'm for. I made my peace with that a long time ago. But I'm done doing it in silence. I used to think keeping it to myself was humility. It isn't. Doing it quietly sounds noble until you understand what you're actually doing, which is setting the pen down and walking away from it, and whoever picks it up will write whatever suits them. Roberta Finch picked it up because I left it on the table. She wrote that I hadn't shown up, and for a few weeks, in a room I was never in, it was true, because there was nothing written anywhere that said otherwise. Now there is. If someone ever tells you that you haven't contributed, before you argue a single word, go find out whose name is on the contract. It's usually a shorter conversation than you think.